Welcome back to What's Up Doc. Today we will be talking about the high school schedule and budgeting changes that may occur next year. So hello.
Hello there.
I was curious, so what are like some proposed schedule ideas that we may need to change next year, and how will that affect the amount of teachers and programs that need to be cut due to that?
Way to start off with a simple question. Yeah, thanks for being here today.
Of course.
So just to contextualize high school schedule changes, as you referenced, it's part of this bigger conversation around budget. Schools in our state are not financed, are not funded the way they should be. We know that. We've been talking about that for quite a while across the state and in our community. Last spring, we had lots of conversation, and one of the items that comes up each year is around the high school schedule, because people know it's an enhanced schedule. It costs more than other schedules. It costs more than the schedule we used to have. And so when budgets are tight and we're making hard decisions, it comes up, like, would you change the high school schedule? So that was a conversation last spring. So what we've done this fall is to bring together an internal group of staff to at least explore, if we ever did change the schedule, do we know what the other schedules look like, what they would, the impact would be, so that if we ever do go out to our community, we're prepared. Yeah. So it's a smart thing for us to make sure we know what we're talking about with different schedules. So our team's been working on that, and whether there's a change for next year of the schedule, I don't yet know. Yeah. The budget is going to evolve over the coming weeks and months. Our voters just supported the passing of one of our levies, which is a great help with our budget. It's just a slice, though, and it really is going to depend upon the state fundamentally changing how schools are funded, but it does help. But we're going to see what the legislature does for the following year, which will really influence what decisions are made. So it's too early to know exactly. Mm-hmm. So with the schedules, we're on an 8 period, or 4 by 8, which has been really beneficial, I think, for students to be able to take a wide range of class. Have you found that in terms of your high school experience?
Definitely. I think students across schools really enjoy being able to take so many different class periods, and there's definitely some more particular electives specifically that only run for 1 period. So having 8 options gives it more chances to kind of pick and choose and be able to sort those maybe only one time running electives into their schedule.
So I think when we switched the 8 period, that was our hope. And so it's really shown that the amount of choices you have is great. The schedules that if we were to ever change to one, the most likely ones would still have quite a bit of elective choice. So one's called the 3 by 5. It's a trimester. It's like what you'd use at Western. You have 3 quarters instead of 4 quarters. Mm-hmm. You would have 5 classes each term. So you have almost as many, the course of the year you'd have 15 classes, where right now you have 16 semester classes. So it's almost the same. Another one is a 7-period day. It has a little less. It has 14 classes a year. Both more enriched than, say, just a straight 6-period schedule, where you only have 12. So if we make a change, it's still going to be of high benefit, I think, to students for that wide range of electives, just a little less. Mm-hmm. And like with the 3 by 5, one of the things folks appreciated about it versus our current schedule is you meet every day, where every other day can be a challenge for some classes, for some students. So there's a consistency. There's also some benefit of only juggling 5 classes at a time instead of 8, which could be a benefit. On the 7-period day, you can also have it where you meet every day, but 7 classes in one day often feels like a lot, so you can also break it down like 4 one day, 3 one, and do some creative things. So the schedules, the ones that we've looked at, the one we have now, a 3 by 5, a 7, all have pros and cons. Yeah. There's not a perfect one. So what we're doing is just making sure we examine what they are. And if we do make a change, I'll be engaging our students and community even more to get their thoughts. And it's probably important to know this is not just a Bellingham thing. I was in a meeting earlier today with superintendents from around the region, and many districts are looking to have to adjust their schedules from an 8 period to a 3 by 5 or such because of the challenge with the state finance.
Definitely. When we mentioned the state, so the state is supposed to fully fund our schools from my understanding, but what is their version of fully funding versus our version of fully funding?
Beautiful question. And in fact, a family a number of years ago sued the state for not funding education. And so they had to go to court, to the Washington State Supreme Court, and argue about what's the definition. They call it what's the definition of basic education. And I won't be able to fully explain it, but there are some basic things that the state should fund. Like, I'm going to show you a slide. This first slide I showed quite a few folks last spring. It's updated. This is the percent of the state's budget that goes to education. You can see a number of years ago, 52% of the state budget went to education. It's now dropped down to 43. So that's a factor. If they could just maintain over 50% of the budget going to K-12, would be in a much better place. This is one example. This is utilities and insurance. So I think the state would say, and the Supreme Court would say, that paying for utilities and insurance is basic. Like, it's about as basic as you get. Like, the building needs to be open, it needs to be heated, and you have to insure your building. Well, this just shows the state used to pay, it used to cost us $3.7 million a year for utilities and insurance. The orange line is how much the state gives us. So they paid it.
Stayed consistent.
And now you can see it's gone up to 7.3 million, but the state has barely increased it. So there's a gap of $3.5 million there. That's the problem that's causing us to have to adjust staffing, adjust program, adjust the schedule, because we're now paying $3+ million for what should be basic education that the state pays for.
I agree.
So that's the best example I can show right there of just, if the state would just pay what they should with this, we would be in a much better place.
You'd have a lot more room to be able to.
Our local levy is supposed to be, they tried to rename it a few years ago, an enrichment levy. It's supposed to enrich the basic. And so it's supposed to pay for extra things, like pay for a better class, 4x8, like more electives. That's kind of enrichment. So that's what our levy should pay for. Athletics and activities.
Definitely.
I think you're involved in drama.
Yes.
Like, and if you do an evening play, that's enrichment, that's extra. Our local levy should be helping do that, not going to utilities and insurance. Yes.
Definitely. I totally agree. I've had a lot of students talk to me about the increased class size from last year to this year, and I was curious what you think that might look like if we're having to adjust our schedule.
Yeah, my preference would certainly be not to increase class size anymore at the high school. We've used that strategy over the last few years. I'd rather not use it again. So if we can maintain the ratio of class size and not make that go up, that'd be ideal. Even better would be to lower class size. No matter what schedule we look at, one way to think of it is class size ratios stay the same, but if you adjust to a new schedule, you can save some dollars.
Definitely.
So if the state could better fund us, one of the things we would go back to do is start to lower some of those class size ratios that we've had to increase across the system.
Definitely. We were also curious, I've talked to a lot of other students in my school that do band and orchestra and more of those visual arts, that these programs that are always facing lots of cuts and maybe having more difficulty with dealing with them. How are you planning to help support those programs and keep those options open? I know I'm in drama, and our Drama 3 class was kind of in jeopardy for a little bit, and so similar to our advanced and our just normal technical theater programs.
Yeah, great question. So at one level, I feel really good about our district and the value we put on, say, visual and performing arts. It's part of the Bellingham Promise. It's one of our outcomes. Our board, our leadership, our principals, our students, our parents, it's of high value. So I think a lot of that nervousness sometimes comes because in other districts we read about that's where cuts are, because they are can be extracurricular, they can be enrichment. We've worked really hard to minimize big impacts. So even though people get nervous about it, we actually haven't done a lot of reduction. But there's also other things at play. So for example, we're dealing with lower birth rates across our state and country and here. And so as we have lower birth rates, that means lower enrollment, and that's gonna move up through elementary into high school. And so when you have fewer students, you have fewer staff and fewer selections of classes. So sometimes just lower enrollment impacts how many sections can be offered of something. The other one is student interest. We try to build our master schedule based upon what students want, and also what our teachers are certified in teaching, and sometimes that adjusts, what's offered or not. So big picture, visual performing arts, it's deeply rooted here. You have a superintendent who plays the saxophone and was in orchestras and bands, and our deputy superintendent is a professional musician. So it's of high value. So I can't, guarantee that anything over the course of the years doesn't get impacted by the challenges, but that's one that's really important to us.
Of course, I'm very glad to hear that. We've heard some buzz around the potential cutting of AP classes, and you sent out a memo recently about how AP classes are not on the line. Could you just expand more on that?
Yeah, thanks for asking. And I appreciate, when people hear rumors, it's helpful to clarify those rumors before thinking they're just factual. So one of the things that occurred that I think was part of this is, I mentioned that I'd been to the Chamber of Commerce. Well, I got to hear the president of Western Washington University talk about how they are vested in our kids getting college credit before coming to university. And specifically, the angle he was talking about is college in the high school, which is something that we do in our district. And that's a newer addition to what we do in our high schools of having Western be a partner. That's just the last few years, and that's because of some changing legislation in Olympia that has incentivized Western Washington University to do more college in the high school. Before it was more so community colleges, whether it's Everett Community College or Skagit. So Western is, because of this new legislation, is emerging as a stronger partner with college in the high school. So the question just came up of how might that influence what we offer, what students want to take. I think that got wrapped inadvertently with, does that mean we're never going to do AP anymore? Yeah. And that's not the case. Could it eventually impact, when you sign up for classes, how many kids sign up for an AP or college in the high school? Maybe. The more college in the high school meets kids' needs, like there's no cost to it. You get a college transcript from Western. Like that might influence the desire to take that. AP, and certainly as I've heard from people the last few days especially, has some uniqueness to it that college in the high school doesn't. It's a standard, it's a test that's given across the country. How do universities look at that differently? Yeah. So I think it's a complex piece. The reality is we offer both. My guess is that we continue to offer both, but as the parameters around what they mean change, it might influence how people see the value of one over the other.
Definitely.
Thanks for asking.
Of course.
One other question I have is, so often I get asked by students, like, how can they give input and influence? And what I often tell them is, one is do what they're often doing, which is emailing me. Yes. So I get emails from students all the time, and I respond back to each one. We have a student advisory committee, which you serve on, which has students from all 4 of our high schools. That's a way. Another way that students can always give input is through someone, if it's not directly to me, someone at their school that they know and trust, an adult like their principal or assistant principal or a teacher who might be the ones that can communicate with me. So I guess I just want to acknowledge that students, their voice is really important, and I love hearing from them, and there's lots of different ways. There's just not one way. Any thoughts you have if you have a student, a freshman that says, hey, I want to make sure my voice is heard, whether it's the schedule or it's something, how they would make sure their voice is heard is...
I would encourage them to, most students are a part of some sort of club or activity or group, and being able to talk to maybe the people in leadership positions in those groups who may have an easier access or output to talk to their club director or teacher or whatever to talk to you, or to be able to have them compile stuff together and get resources to either contact you directly or any of the other input ways. And just I think generally just asking your friends, your older friends, your seniors, your upperclassmen about changes that they see, or maybe if they have more knowledge, because I think some of our freshmen and underclassmen don't know as much about the resources or how to learn about the things that are happening in our schools, or might not be aware of memos or stuff like that. So I think asking people who will have more answers to be able to form your own opinions, and then be able to go off of that and respond in a clear way.
Great. Well, thank you. Thanks for being here today and for asking such great questions.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.